The story of Merlindale, where we started, begins at Arthuret in Cumbria.
The Battle of Arthuret took place in 572, was it?
Yeah.
73? 573?
Where Merlin went mad.
573, yeah.
573, yeah.
Merlin went mad with the amount of people that died.
Yes.
80,000.
We're talking a mind-boggling amount of people here. 80,000 people.
Christians and pagans clashed.
Yes, Roderick of the British against...
The Christian Roderick.
Against the pagan Scottish king.
Yeah, Strathclyde.
Who was named...
Gwendolew.
Was that Merlin's sister, Gwendolew?
Yes.
No, he was a king. He was the king of Strathclyde and the pagan Britons at the time. So there was this big clash between those...
The Welsh-speaking Scots.
Yes, exactly. Yes, exactly.
The same family as Gildas.
Yes.
Yeah. People say, why did this place... Why was it called Arthuret? And it's supposed to mean or
Arthurid.
Arthurid, yeah. Some people say it's the head of Arthur, but it's probably where Arthur actually viewed the armies, because just on this ridge over here, where the Holy Well is, you can look down on a huge plain.
Oh, that's
of
the River Esk.
Yeah. And that plain is where you could get 80,000 people, not up here on this roof. And so it said that the leaders would have viewed, or Arthur may have viewed, the armies battling down there, or the leaders of the battle, that's for sure. But then there's two big mounds behind us, one of them still covered by those trees. But inside those trees there's a very large sort of ridge. And some say some of the dead were buried in that mound. The church itself is a very early church. And some say from the earliest Christian times, but several terrible rebuildings have destroyed a lot of the archaeology.
I was just going to say, of course, this ridge is the sacred part of this whole area. You know, it's said to have been a druid sanctuary, a beacon site, a place of ceremony. So it's actually that ridge where the trees are is the sacred place, and that's where the male current comes as he comes from Carlisle. That's what he's focused on, and of course the tower of the church draws him too. And then we're going to take you to a holy well just behind, where he also goes before he heads to Scotland. Wow.
But some people say that Arthur himself was buried here. This is not, this is just some people's opinion, but there was a plaque in the church that said that King Arthur, according to tradition, was buried here. And there's two sort of 5th century, 6th century mounds, burial mounds in the graveyard here. You can see by the wall.
You can hardly see them.
You can just see one there. There were grassy mounds. Yeah, they're early graves from the time, possibly from that time. So some people point, well, perhaps Arthur was buried in one of those mounds.
But the word, of course, the Scottish Arthur is Arthur of Dunkeld.
Yes, exactly. It just means the leader, the bearer.
The title as well.
The title, yeah, exactly. Arthur is the title, just as Merlin is. The curious things. Unfortunately, we can't go in the church, but if you ever come back and the church is open, say if it's on a Sunday, there's a very unusual, they call it the heart brass, and it's a piece of one of the grave brass, and then in the middle is a heart with two hands, and it's supposed to represent the soul. It came from a knight crusader's probably tomb, so they say. Also, on the outside of the tower, where the Venus current goes through, somebody's carved a grail just sticking out of the tower, which I thought was really odd, and there's a picture of it in the book. You'll see that as we pass it.
Where the male current enters the tower.
Lost their lives in this place.
Side of the battle.
So, but there must have been a lot more involved in the fighting.
At the site of Merlin's grave, this Merlin was the wild man Merlin, the Scottish Lilakin. And those of you who were with us last time at Arthuret, that was the site of the battle where he went mad. And he fled into the woods of Celadon, which are between here and Arthuret. And it was here that he met his threefold death. Like many of the gods, even the god Lu met a threefold death. So that sort of godlike death has been attributed to Merlin. St Kentigern was in this area, and he met Lalakin, and Lalakin said to him that he'd had this dream of a threefold death. And so Kentigern baptised him at an altar stone about a few miles down the road.
Where are we going next?
The half of that altar stone was taken off and put inside St Kentigern's church, which is a really old Celtic chapel which you'll really enjoy, with some megalithic blocks in the old chapel that's actually a north-south orientation. But here, this is the site, and the furthest south we'll be going on this trip, because after this place we'll be going north further enough, keep going north all the way up to the Highlands. So behind us is the church of Drumelsia. Drumelsia actually means the fort of Merlin, Dunmelsia, which is Merlin in Anglia.
Yeah.
There is a fort that you can see when we go back to the coach and we drive that way. On the right hand side, the remains of a castle which is said to be Merlin's fort. But it's here where the Powsel meets the Tweed, and the Tweed's just there.
Just over there.
And it was Thomas the Rhymer. Thomas the Rhymer was a 12th century poet who was given his gift by the fairies when he met the Queen of Elfland, and he came back. Although a few weeks had passed, several years had passed for him, he'd been taken out of time, like an abduction scenario, and was given the gift of poetry and second sight. And he said that there was a prophecy, this is in the 12th century, that where the Powsel burn meets the Tweed, England
will
at Merlin's grave,
under one king.
England will reunite under one king.
Yeah. Well, Britain.
Britain, yeah.
James I.
That was James I. And interestingly, at that time, there was a huge storm, and the Powsel burn was moved its course from this line of the wall. You see where the wall is, the stone wall. That's the old course, and it changed its course to this course here. And of course the prophet, this is 12th century, it moved to Merlin's grave. This is what we're getting. So Merlin's grave was actually down here, so it's moved to where Merlin's grave is. And for centuries there's been a really old thorn tree there. You can see a young thorn with a kind of a little fence around it. You see that, and we can cross that bridge to it. And then there's a little plaque at the bottom of that tree that says, "This is Merlin's thorn," and this is on the site of the original thorn. And people who actually go to that thorn have been given the kind of Merlin's gifts, haven't they?
Yeah, the gift of prophecy and yes,
Caroline's
gift and
gonna take
vision. I mean, the Tweed itself, Ellen, of course, Ellen goes through the church. She doesn't actually go through the site of Merlin's grave, but she does follow the Tweed for several miles, all the way through Peebles. And I don't know, some of you might know that we're actually investigating a new alignment of sites and dragons from Lindisfarne to Iona. And so we meet the Tweed again much further north, because the Tweed runs for 96 miles, and it comes out of a well near Moffat and winds its way all the way up to Berwick-on-Tweed. So it's a very long
East Tweed and the West Tweed.
Yes.
Right. So it's just the West Tweed.
This is the West Tweed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this is quite a young river, so as it comes out towards Berwick, it becomes wider and wider. So it's quite a special river, and of course a lot of the old this is the old lands of the Brythonic speaking Britons, the Welsh, if you like. So this is the northern Welsh lands, and because over time all the old sort of trade coming across Europe, coming across the North Sea from the east, would come through Berwick-on-Tweed and come all the way down to these lands, via the great rivers, including the Esk, where we'll be later. this afternoon, which is just that runs through the Glen of Roslin Chapel, being reminded. Now, very interestingly, the gentleman who lives in this house just behind the church, who owns this tennis court, he is running a Merlin conference on Wednesday nearby at Moffat, which is just to the west of here. No, and he's quite an expert, so he knows we're here today and has given us lots of interesting insights into what's been going on here as far as excavations are concerned. And there's going to be a big geophysics investigation of this area quite soon.
Wow!
So try and find Merlin's grave once and for all.
Yeah. So the conference, interestingly, is entitled "Man or Myth." So it'll be all the old arguments that'll be coming up about Merlin. But I thought it was really interesting, and this man was all part of it, and. So we had a very interesting chat, and it's so nice to meet him yesterday that he could give us a little bit of insight of what's been happening here. So now we'll just walk along here, and we'll go down to the bridge.
Threefold death.
Oh yeah. So did you? Oh yes. Okay. Well, the threefold death. Well, let's walk a little away, and we'll show you where his threefold death might have been.
No, it was here. Here, a local gang had attacked him with stones. Shepherds. He'd fallen down this bank here, and of course the river was much wider then, and impaled himself on a fisherman's stake. But he was still alive, but as the tide came in and the Tweed rose, it drowned him. So he met his threefold death. That is the ancient tradition of this place, which was repeated by Walter Scott, Sir Walter Scott, the great poet in the 19th century. And he also wrote about Merlin's threefold death. So the thing is, nobody really knows where Merlin's grave is. Up until the 19th century, there was a thorn tree, that one down there, said to mark the spot. But other people have said there is a cairn that was before that. That was a large cairn full of stones, and where those stones, well, we don't know. But as Claire pointed out, this stone wall is the only stone wall in the whole valley. And it's interesting, they may have taken those stones for that wall from this large cairn.
And also you'll see a lot of stones scattered about, scattered about as we walk down towards the river. You'll see quite large stones scattered about your feet, so who knows. So maybe dowsers among you, or really keen sensors, you might be able to see where you think it might be.
Gary, has Merlin got watery associations? I was just thinking of Mer, sea, and Lynn, lake. Whether it's just a coincidence.
Yes, it could be.
No,
yes,
it's not because
it's Merlin.
I can answer that.
Merlin. M-Y-R-D-D.
Yes, exactly.
The original name where Merlin comes from, Merlin, from Wales and Carmarthen. We'll be doing this in the South Wales Moot.
Oh, I see.
There's actually a placard up in Carmarthen which is said to be the birthplace of Merlin, or Maiden. It's interesting, which is the opposite of this, which is its place of death, burial.
There were many Merlins.
Yes, but just to say, let me finish the point though. Merlin, it says on it, means he who comes from the sea. Mer as in sea, as in mermaid, merman. The mirror of the sea, shining like a mirror, reflecting the sky.
Very important,
So there is a connection.
We'll talk more about Merlin's title and what it means when we go to Stobo Church, because that's that is a place where
he was baptised.
It's strong associations with there, and it's the another place we can talk. So I think for now we'll come down and have a look, see if we can find the real Merlin's grave. The geophysics is going to be concentrating on that field, and I'll tell you why, because that was the old course of the Powsel burn that moved during the time of James I, and it's moved again since to this spot. So people say, well, if that's true, then the original site must be where that gate is over there.
That's where it meets the Tweed.
At the corner of that field, which is the old place where it used to meet. So that's where they're doing the geophysics in a couple of weeks' time. But for now, we're going down to the traditional place that's been pointed out since the times of Sir Walter Scott.
He's making his way around there. It's just here.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. So the thorn straight ahead, by the stone wall, is where the Powsel used to flow, coming down the hill, along the side where the wall is now, and that's another possible site of Merlin's grave, because that's where the Powsel would have used to have met the Tweed. The Tweed running along the line of trees here, and then takes a big bend and crosses to go up to Peebles, where we'll be going a bit later. This is why the geophys are coming here, to ascertain exactly where the grave, see if they can find any sort of echoes of a long cairn, whether it's here or over there.
Came out, flowed out here, and that bank there marked where it flowed out to the Tweed. Can you see the bank here?
Yeah, just here.
Yes, there is.
And you can almost see there's a bank between the field and where the Tweed used to be. Separating it. It's almost like a rampart. Yeah?
Very clear.
And Merlin's grave is said to be where the Powsall met the Tweed. Well, this is where the Powsall met the Tweed in old times. So, yeah, but that's not very old though. The problem is they don't live that long. Even this one here will only live 150 years, 200 years, maybe at the most. But and that's why they reckon that thorn over there was Merlin's, because it replaced a really old thorn. But then, you know, the story could have just been attached to the oldest thorn in the area. Scientifically, it's got to be this place historically as well, because this is where the Powsall met the Tweed. Merlin's grave must have been somewhere in here, because these stones here came from somewhere. There's no other stones in all the fields around here, so they obviously take stones from where they can find them in a close proximity in those days. So, as you know, from the size of the stones usually determines the age, and this is an old wall. Probably from 15th, 16th, maybe earlier centuries.
So that's where.
And this could have been from Merlin's grave.
Yeah. Well, I'd say so.
So there must have been a bank stones, a whole bank.
Well, look, you know, in Wales and in Ireland, the great kings and bards are buried under huge cairns, stone cairns.
Massive ones.
Yes.
Massive
So
ones.
all these would form
Yes.
A huge cairn somewhere in this area here. Now, what is interesting, we haven't got time to see it. If you come back, if you walk half a mile back, you come to a standing stone. Now, some people say, was that Merlin's grave? And as the Powsall moved again. So we're going to walk up through that gate, along the track, by the Powsall burn.
Ellen throws through this tree. Stobo Kirk.
a wee wall over here. Yeah.
And you can see this little, what looks like a north aisle sticking out here, with the pebbly-like stones, probably taken from the river. This is the oldest part, and this is originally St Mungo or St Kentigern's church. Inside there, this window at the side here depicts Merlin being baptised by St Kentigern. When you go in, you'll see this. And at the altar area of this chapel, by this little round ocular window at the side, is a piece of the altar stone that Merlin was baptised on, before he confessed his threefold prophecy of death, which happened back where we were before. And so in the life of St Kentigern, this prophecy was also written down. So it was written by Scott, Thomas O'Reimer, and in the life of St Kentigern. But this is a fabulous church. It actually looked a lot better 10 years ago, before it was restored, because it had much more larger blocks of stone in them. But they've taken the crumbling blocks of stone away and put more pebbles in. But as you can see, there's some large megalithic type stones in the foundations, around the side, around the bottom. The cornerstone, for instance, always the cornerstone of the church is important. The foundation stone, so it's like probably a piece of the altar as well. You also see in there some good 6th century, 8th century gravestones, grave slabs with Masonic symbols. You'll probably notice on your way around here some of the gravestones are fabulously carved in the sort of 18th century style. Stonemasons, some of them, some are but wealthy families tend to have those in relief carvings like the Picts, like the Pictish stones. So they kind of continued it on into the 18th century in gravestones. Some of the best examples can be seen in the front graveyard there. So I want you just to look at this. This is where Ellen comes down from Drumelsia along this piece of graveyard here and flows right through the chapel now, going off in that direction towards Cadimure Hill, which is where King Arthur supposedly fought his 7th battle. And this is also recorded in the 14th century by historians in the area. That on Cadimure Hill there was once Arthur's cromlech, or Arthur's oon, and it was basically a prehistoric cromlech like Arthur's stone in Wales. Yeah. Which is much older than Arthur, of course, but then Arthur is another name for the great spirit warrior, protector god, as Merlin was a title for somebody who was an astrologer, a court astrologer. Now the kings who were the most powerful, and I quote Frederick II, because he used Michael Scott, the great Scottish prophet and wizard, and his knowledge of astrology allowed him to fight his battles at the right time, to do with the transit of Venus, and the rising of Venus is very important, as it is to the Freemasons today. All third degree Masons are usually inducted when the rising of Venus at the equinox, during the rise of Venus at the equinox. So it's still a powerful time, and astrologers, their job in those days was to highlight the times most beneficial to the king, so that he would win his battles, gain his fortunes, even siring his children, inception, things like all those things would be important to look at the astrology. So every king had to have a Merlin, and it's said that the great Owain had of Reged had a Merlin, and this Merlin here, but according to the story, the Merlin here confessed to Kentigern he was the Merlin of King Arthur, from Wales, because this was once part of Wales, because Wales was not just a little country that's sticking out in the corner of Britain, it was actually a long country going right up to the borders of the Forth. So anything north of the Forth was Pictish, south of the Forth was British and Welsh speaking, but not the Welsh today, the old Welsh speaking Brythonic peoples. And a lot of the place names around here are still in Welsh.
Except for this one. Except for Stobo, yeah, which is actually an Anglian word, because of course then this became part of the Anglian kingdom, and it actually means holy place, so it's always been sort of considered as such. So we were just contemplating as to where Kentigern and Mungo would have got the water to baptise Merlin, because there's no well here that we know of. Perhaps there once was, unless of course he took him to the Tweed, which is literally just below us here, so he might have even taken him to the Tweed. But interestingly, the piece of altar stone that you'll see in a minute came from a megalith called the altar stone, which is on a little back road, which we couldn't take you to because it's far too narrow and difficult to get to. But Ellen actually goes through that megalith, and a piece of stone goes through from there is here in this little coldy cell, of which it was once upon a time, a flat top piece from that altar stone megalith, which she, and of course also she's going straight there, so she comes down here straight through that altar stone from where she's come from. It's, the mother of it. The mother of it. Yeah. So anyway, I think it's time to go into the church and have a look inside this very special, beautiful, energetic. Yeah, and there's guidebooks in the church if you want them as well. But have a lovely look at the church, because, as I say, it's full of, as Gary said, carved stones
and beautiful stained glass windows. Yeah.
At the side of the road, a little further along the valley near Alterstone Farm, Ellen passes through a large boulder with a flattened top half hidden in the undergrowth. A story associated with it describes the day when St. Kentigern was surprised in his solitude by an apparition of a wild and naked savage who commanded to speak to him. he said that his name was Lailochen, a bard also known as Merlin in the British court of King Vortigern, who had converted to Christianity after a great battle. Now a homeless wanderer living amongst the beasts of the field, he believed himself a grievous sinner seeking repentance after causing the terrible slaughter of so many men at the Battle of Arthuret. After hearing his confession, he received from St. Kentigern the Holy Sacrament and baptized the bard on the altar stone. Later that day, Merlin suffered his deadly fate. Cross Kirk, Peebles.
When we dowsed north of here, the currents were switched around, so we knew there must be somewhere in this area a node point, but we didn't know where. So to save time, I had the idea of going down by the Tweed and just meditate on it and see if anything comes up in a picture in my head, like we did further down in the Spine of Albion in Cannock Chase. And while we're down by the river, we're focusing, and then we both got this sort of impression of iron railings, and that was it really. A church,
stone ruin.
and a ruin with some iron railings around it. So we thought, well, that must be in Peebles. So we looked at that church tower that you passed, and that's St. Kentigern's church as well. That goes back to the 5th century as well. Fortunately, that was destroyed, but that was St. Mungo Church. And Ellen does go through that one, coming this way. But didn't cross there, so we thought, where is this cross? And then suddenly, well, we walked down to the other church, the main church, and found Bolinas coming through that, and that church has got like a crown on it. That's an interesting church.
On the site of the castle?
And it's on the site of a castle as well, yes. So the two currents were heading up here, and when we came through these houses and saw the iron railings, we thought, well, this must be a hit. And sure enough, when we dowsed around, the node point was inside this north aisle again. You know, like the St. Kentigern's church we've just been to at Stobo? There was a north sort of aisle sticking out. This is the oldest part of the church. And this was built by the Trinitarians, who were a stonemason sort of order of monks. They built Kelso Abbey and a few other abbeys at Selkirk. Yeah. And recently a lot of authors have tied them into the sort of history of the Freemasons, that the Trinitarians brought that knowledge with them during the time of Alexander I, the Third, yeah.
Also, of course, they're also tied in with the Knights Templar, because they came originally from France and had a lot of associations with them. So, you know, that's interesting in itself. But these, as we've since learned, because of course we've been studying Kelso Abbey, because that's where the dragons of this new line we're discovering are associated with, that they built that abbey, and they knew a lot of the mysteries, let's put it that way. They had a lot of occult knowledge, they knew about sacred geometry, all the sciences, all the sort of hermetic stuff that came out later. So they had this really deep knowledge of the mysteries of the universe, as it were, and of course, you know, with their associations and their building expertise, they had a lot to do with the Knights Templars eventually, and the building of all the beautiful cathedrals and abbeys all over France and Scotland. But also Peebles is a very interesting city in itself. I mean, it's got a lot of pagan associations, because inside here we actually find there's the threshold stone which Ellen connects with as she comes into the site of the ruin, which is another megalith, like we've seen at Stobo Church. So this place, possibly on top of the hill above the Tweed, was a site of a stone circle. Again, that's something you can, when you've had your lunch, maybe have a douse and see what you find here. But we felt that very strongly. Peebles goes back to the time of Beltane fires and Beltane pilgrimages up through the town to this spot, which of course was taken over later by the Holy Rood story, carrying the so-called Cross of Christ through the streets. But before then it was all to do with the Beltane ceremonies, which has got quite a strong history here in this town. Because it became a royal burgh during the time of David I, and when this was founded, this particular, it was an abbey and then a monastery, and then eventually just abandoned for when Peebles became a much more lucrative market town and trading place on the Tweed, and then the merchants took over, and the old pagan sites were then forgotten. So, yes, one
Yep.
couple of things.
Yeah, the name Peebles means the place of tents, and it's an old Brythonic word.
Yeah.
And we think it might have been because of the tradition here of the great battle that Arthur fought at Cadmerigh Hill, which overlooks this town, and that they actually camped and tented in this area. But this little place here seems to have a much earlier history, because the bones of St. Nicholas are supposed to have been buried here. So this little sacred ground, surrounded by housing estates, with just a couple of little signs to get you here, is a very important historical place. And that's why we thought, well, no wonder the currents come together in this sort of north aisle here. Unfortunately we can't get in there, so in the book you'll see there's a picture of the expression of the node on the ground, what we pegged out with string. And that was just here, because you can actually douse the node signature, like Hamish did, away from the node, but just tuning into the node and ask what shape is the signature of the node. And as we found with all the Spine of Albion nodes, there were 6-pointed stars. And there was a 6-pointed star here.
But it was distorted.
Yeah, slightly distorted, not a perfect one.
Because what we found was that as when Ellen comes away from Stobo Church, she actually skirts the western slopes of Cadmerigh Hill. Bellinus goes over Cadmerigh Hill, and of course, as Gary said, that was a place of a lot of conflicts, and also the town during many of the old battles of the borders. So they were a little bit out of balance and distorted. So we had to do a little bit of healing on them, and once we did that, we re-doused the signature. Took the string up, redoused the signature after the healing, and it was actually perfectly aligned as a 6-pointed star. So that's always a great indication that our healing intentions have worked. Of course, we've been travelling all the way through Britain with Ellen and Bellinus, so they were well tuned into us as we were to them by this stage, and we've done that many times as we made our way up through Scotland, through England and Scotland. So I think now we've given you all the information. Anything you want to know, just ask us. But have your lunch, have a douse, just chill out until 2 o'clock, and then we're going to head up to Roslyn Chapel.
Roslyn Castle.
This is one of the most haunted places in Scotland.
You're not turned on.
Yes.
I tell you no lie.
You're not turned on.
You're not that present. Yeah, Roslyn Glen here, if you're overlooking Roslyn Glen, is a very important geological sort of site. 2 fault lines, major fault lines through Scotland come together here. So we've got this power of magnetism around this site.
Of sandstone.
And this creates a lot of the phenomena that's found here. Time slips, people seeing ghost apparitions, dogs, black dogs. There's a black dog that haunts the castle here. And
Strange lights chasing people.
yeah, strange lights, lots of plasma sort of seen around here, which is often born out of these major faults. And I think the St. Clair's who originally built this castle knew it was an important site, and it's said that the Roslin treasure is buried in the vaults of the castle here, and that sometime in the future a white lady will manifest and point to where the treasure is buried, and that's yet to happen. Oh, thank God we're not out in the open on this. Roslin village we passed through is built in the shape of an upside down cross, and the chapel is built at the end of at the bottom of the cross, or the head of the cross if you like. The village itself was supposed to be a geographical of importance, where north, south and east west roads come together, so they saw it as some kind of ancient centre of Lothian. And the Picts revered it long before the chapel was built, or the castle was built.
Well, nobody remembers still in Rock is Lou, place our government.
Yes, the land of Lou, basically, yes, absolutely. What did we say, yes. So, yeah, by about 1400, Roslin village was so large that it became a burgh, and it was the second or third largest town in the Lothians. Today it's just a village, but it was very important in the past. And it was here that the Sinclairs decided to build the castle, and then eventually the chapel up on the hill, which we'll talk about later. And the original chapel was a little further down in the graveyard. That was where it said the original William Sinclair was married, and that was a chapel to this castle. So this castle itself is now turned into apartments, and you can actually stay here.
So the reason that we came here, in the first place, is because we were following the male and female currents of this new line between Lindisfarne, or I should say Bamber Castle, and Iona. And there's a node here of the two lines of the male and female, which we call Bride and Lou, as it happens, because of the nature of the history and the landscape here. And we'd been tuning into the site long before we knew about the line, and we were brought, it was all synchronistic sort of spirit communication that got us on this amazing journey, and Roslyn is very much a very important link in this whole story. So the bride, the Ellen equivalent, brings us to this castle. And she also goes through the old chapel site back in the churchyard and the old St Matthew's well. If we have time to see it, we will, but unfortunately it's capped today with some horrendous concrete sort of little pod. And apparently it was capped many, sort of decades ago. One story is that cholera came to the area and they had to cap it. Another is that the ancient gypsy race that were very much part of this landscape, that Sir William Sinclair, the builder of the chapel, invited here, knowing that they were actually Egyptian nomads, going back, way back. And he invited them to settle here, and they used that well for their water, and the locals didn't like it, so contaminated it. But unfortunately there's not much to see today, but there is water, sort of, you can see where the pipes are and the pods are.
Renowned for its healing qualities.
Yeah, and very much renowned for its healing qualities. And so we have a node of the male and the female going through the chapel, so that will be something for the dowsers to look at. The glen is very important as well to both currents, which is below us. We've got the north-esque, sorry, I'm looking down, coming over. The north-esque flows below us in the glen, and the Esk River starts with the north, a tributary of two tributaries, the north and the south, that come out of the Pentland Hills, and that make their way south from here. And one of the places that, as well as here, that the Esk goes through, or the North Esk goes through, is Pennycook House. which we would have passed on our way here, which is a site on Ellen, which we hadn't discovered, well, we couldn't get to because the Pennycook House estate was closed. Now it's open to the public, and it's got a very interesting connection to Roslin, in that it was owned by Sir John Kirk, who had a lot to do with the restoration of Roslin. So he was connected with two very important serpent energies of Bride and Ellen. Whether he knew that, I don't know, because yes, the other thing is that he reconstructed an ancient temple that was known as Arthur's Oon, that originally stood near Falkirk, and he reconstructed it on a tower of the coach house in which Ellen goes through. But Bride, the current that is here, going through here, this castle and the chapel, actually goes through the original site of this Arthur's Oon temple in Falkirk. So he was certainly connected in these two currents that brought him here and that was going through his land, and so I thought that was a very interesting connection. Yeah, I think we should move on.
Where does the lay from Huly Hill to Bamberg Castle to Iona cross with the one we're on now, the Spine of Albion?
Oh, the Spine of Albion. Yeah, Huly Hill is the two male currents.
Oh, where we're going tomorrow morning.
Yeah, the two male currents are blue, and that's where we're going tomorrow, cross at Huly Hill. Yeah, but the two lines cross near Balerno.
On the
Yes, the Dalmahoy Hills, yeah, which is now a massive big quarry.
This castle is on an interesting lay coming up from Mary Magdalene's chapel on Mount Lothian, associated with the mythical King Lot. This due north-running line could be a side of the lunation triangle formed by the United Kingdom capitals Edinburgh, Cardiff and London, which was discovered by Robin Heath. The lunation triangle is a right-angled triangle of sides with the proportions 5, 12 and 13, which could have been used as a calendar in prehistoric times and also predict eclipses. Robin demonstrates how this might have been done using a rope on the video Stone Age Science in the Preseli Hills on this channel. The Chapel of St Mary was named for Mary Magdalene and was built on the knoll of a rounded hill that's known as Mount Lothian. There were 13 sycamore trees in a grove on this hill, and it should be noted that Mount Lothian is named after King Lot, who is said to have made his home here. This legendary ruler of the Lothians is said to be the father of Gawain and his brothers. He was also said to be the husband of King Arthur's sister, Anna. This chapel is on another very interesting lay, running due north to Arthur's seat, the hill fort in the middle of Edinburgh. This then runs to Roslin Castle. There's been a castle on the site since the early 14th century, when the Sinclair family fortified the site. Then it goes to Roslin Chapel, founded in 1446 by Sir William St Clair. The beauty of its setting in rural Midlothian and the mysterious symbolism of its ornate stonework have inspired, attracted and intrigued writers and artists and visitors ever since. It continues to the spectacular hill fort of Arthur's Seat, often mentioned as one of the possible locations for Camelot. And according to tradition, Scotland's 12th century King David I encountered a stag while out hunting. Having fallen from his horse and about to be gored, he had a vision of a cross appearing between the animal's antlers, before it inexplicably turned away, leaving him unharmed. David, believing his life had been spared through divine intervention, founded Holyrood Abbey on the spot. Finally, the line reaches the ruins of St Anthony's Chapel, Holyrood Park. Surprisingly little is known about the origin of the chapel. We then visited Roslin Chapel, the intricately carved building nearby, which is also on the north-running line through Arthur's Seat, as well as the Holy Axis line mentioned by Gary, which goes to Iona. It was founded in 1446 by William St Clair, but originally didn't have an altar, but pillars like a Masonic lodge. The elaborately carved apprentice pillar, with its spirals, is somewhat like the double helix of DNA. There are dragons round the base, and it has been compared with the Nordic Tree of Life. The carvings include a large number of green men. This knight could be William the Seemly St. Clair, who is said to have escorted Queen Margaret to Scotland for her marriage to King Malcolm Canmore in 1070. There also seem to be 2 riders on the horse, which is a Templar symbol.
Huli Hill, which means Holy Hill in Brythonic. It's a stone circle and a large cairn. There were 12 stones here, very large stones made of a kind of volcanic ironstone, so it's full of crystals, so they're highly magnetic stones. And it is a real junction of earth energies here and alignments. We've got the Holy Axis male current loop coming through here, through that stone over there, going through the middle, crossing with Ellen, who comes through the middle, Belinus, and through this stone here.
Just explain who Lou is again.
Lou is the male current of the Holy Axis, as is Belinus is the male current of the
So the Holy
Spine of
Axis
Albion,
is our north or east-west alignment that we're researching.
Yeah, okay. The Holy Axis is, most of you know, from Barnborough Castle through Roslin Chapel, the lakes, the special islands on Loch Lomond, through Kilmartin, up to Cairn Papel. There's so many places on it, but it finishes at Iona anyway. But this place is just on one of those alignments. Another one is the Cairn Papel Trepain Law alignment. This site is on, so it is a real sort of junction box of earth energy. And a piper should play a lament here because it's, as you can see, it's in the middle of industrial estate. It was probably one of the most important prehistoric sites, sacred circles, Neolithic circle in Edinburgh. Well, not in Edinburgh, in the Lothians, maybe even in the south of Scotland. This was probably like the Stonehenge of the lowlands, if you like. I mean, there are greater stone circles, but this circle, if it was complete, would be quite an impressive site. It's not been fully excavated, so there may have been a double ring here. This cairn may have been a later feature, but they did find a chariot here buried, and Celtic burials. So it was used by the Celts as one of their most sacred grounds. So it has a history of being a burial site, a ceremonial site. So it's such a shame that it's built where it is. But as Lawrence was saying before, we often find some of the sacred places around or on the land of airports. And the Spine of Albion itself, the straight axis, goes through about 7 airfields or airports. And it's...
At Bryce Norton.
Yes.
Yeah. Maybe they helped give safe passage.
Well, that's a nice way of looking at it.
Yeah. Can I just say a couple of things?
Yeah.
Right. Just to follow on from what Gary was saying about this being one of the most important sites in Scotland, prehistoric sites. It goes back to Neolithic. Oh, sorry. Goes back to Neolithic times. We're just talking about the runway. Well, this site actually extended from Neolithic times to the runway, where the runway is today. And one of the most important features is a huge long stone, very tall stone called the cat stane, which was on the runway, which was a Neolithic stone. And that was demolished for the building of the runway, along with so many other burials and other sacred henges and tumuluses, and they weren't all burials. And there's also an eastern outlier going straight ahead, and it's in right next to the reception door of an engineering body shop.
Yeah, it's that sort of building with the sort of creamish walls, where that signboard is.
Yeah, so you'd have to cross over the other side of the
roundabout.
Of the roundabout, and this enormous, huge standing stone stands right next to their reception, door. So you go into their you know, automatic doors, and there it is right next to it. And that's what aligns this site to the eastern sites of Arthur Seat and Trappane Law, and then to the west. So it's all on this east-west equinoctial line that goes all the way to Cairn Papel, which is another very important prehistoric site.
Which has got a, which has now got a big mast.
Yeah, so Cairn Papel, another beautiful site like this on a very sacred hill. Has got, that's its main feature, is a horrible mast.
If the trees weren't here behind us, we'd have this, you know, view of these sites, including Arthur's Seat. So, you know, standing on top there, you probably see Cairn Papel in the distance. So yeah, it has that sort of, it's a sighting place as well. So it's so where the two great male currents meet in this site. So it's kind of a masculine site. Lawrence had a dream that we must fire up the male current of the Blenus line. So this might be a good site to sort of do a sort of visualization of the male energy, sort of expanding its energy and light coming down to it and then pushing it out throughout the land to sort of bring more balance to what's going on at the moment.
Yes, did we mention that up until 2010 this was just a field of brambles?
Wow.
So nobody knew it was here.
Wow.
So, and then suddenly someone in the council decided to make it a feature and just clear it. So we wouldn't have known it was here until that time, you know, so it was only after something like 2011 that we discovered it. And we came here with Graham Gardner because he was interested, because he'd been following all these other Scottish alignments. Harry Bell lines. So yeah, it was just amazing when he told us that. He said, yeah, you know, you wouldn't believe it. But sadly it's still attracting this dark energy.
Yeah.
You know, and all these piles, and so we need to do some major clearing here because it's such an important site energetically for Scotland. Yes,
Get any UFO activity or sensors? I said it was
probably light balls. Yeah, light balls. Is it because they're plasma?
Yeah.
You know, that's what it is. It's not nuts and bolts crafts. It's plasma intelligence. Which is another.
Well, the Lothians is one of the hot spots in the whole country for balls of light plasma because of the geology here. It's really intense, volcanic ironstone, lots of fault lines. It's and underground water is key to plasma. You have to have that friction of underground water. It's not just the faults in itself that makes plasma. So I think there's been a lot of UFO abduction scenarios that have gone on in the history of the Lothians. We could, the Holy Axis has a couple of those abduction stories that are more like plasma encounters with
and
a
time
high
slips,
intelligent form
loss
of energy
for that person. So they think they've been somewhere else.
but their body hasn't moved. It's almost like they've made an astral journey, if you like what I mean. But we'll be talking about that as the day goes on, because
The
there are other
Falkirk
places.
is another area.
Where's something?
Yeah, the
Falkirk.
Falkirk Triangle.
Yes.
Have you heard of Falkirk Triangle?
And that's
one
where
of the biggest
Arthur's
UFO
Owen was
hotspots.
originally.
Yeah.
Arthur's Owen, we talked about yesterday, they
Yes.
moved it from Falkirk, didn't they? Or Arthur's Owen.
Arthur's Owen, yes, that's right.
Yeah,
It's originally near
the
Falkirk.
temple,
They moved
that's right, on the Carron,
There's a lot of hidden sacred sites in that area of the Falkirk Triangle. It's no wonder it's been a hotspot for UFO activity or plasma lights. Yesterday I was going to tell a story of a friend of mine called John Ritchie, who was a Knights Templar, a modern day Knights Templar, and he was also on the sort of committee of Roslin Chapel, and he'd been brought up in that area. And as a young boy, he used to play in the passages below Roslin Castle. And he said one day they were out there in the early evening, it was going dark, and they saw a ball of light in one of the corridors, and it just a sphere, but intense bright light. And so they ran from it, and as they were running, he looked round, it morphed into the black dog, which is the legend of the castle. But that has a legend of this menacing black dog, and because it's in people's consciousness, the intelligence morphed into something that they would understand. So it morphed into the black dog. But he said it's interesting how it was originally a ball of light and then changed. And that's the thing about abductions changing into what we perceive to be something from another world, or they want to try and communicate with us, so they look into our head and see the wrong things, I think.
Well, often, I mean, in the First World War, you know, it was the angels, wasn't it? That a lot of
if you're religious, you'll see a Virgin Mary. If you're a UFO nut, you'll see a grey, etc., etc.
But we're just trying to make sense of it,
yes,
aren't we?
exactly.
Just trying to make logical sense
until
of
we, you know, 'cause nobody talked about plasma.
because it's something other.
It's the highest form of energy. I mean, the sun's made, most of the universe is made from it. We're a lower form of that for a reason, as if, you know, like in the spiritual sense, we've all come down the spheres to try and physically experience, you know, in a body without being a kind of ethereal form. We learn more in the and play things out in the physical, emotional scenarios than actually floating about in a beautiful universe. So for some reason, and I don't think everybody agrees that we had to undergo it and to come down. So all we've done is really come down the plasma sort of routes, like from plasma to gases, from gases to liquids, from liquids to solids, and that's how it goes. But so we've actually come from plasma. So we are, in essence, plasma.
As are the dragon lines.
As are the dragon lines, of course, and that's why we have this communication with them, because it's actually the intelligence of plasma that's working through the lines, which are a form of plasma anyway. Wow. So here we have a kind of plasma centre.
Amazing.
Just like to say that John Rich is actually buried in that churchyard we were by yesterday.
Roslyn Chapel.
I don't know if you were aware that he died some years ago.
Yes.
Roslyn, he's actually buried there. And when I come up there with Sonia in the past, we've always gone to the graveside, you know, to say thanks to John. Because I do remember in my early days of being involved, he was a very combative commentator on the Roslyn thing, often crossing swords with Andrew Sinclair, who used to explode sometimes. But I was with John on most of what I was saying.
I used to have lots of conversation about the Stone of Destiny, because he was equally fascinated with where it is. Because we know it exists, we know it's a lump of meteorite, we know it's got carvings and Egyptian hieroglyphs on it. We know it's hidden somewhere, we know that there are clues to all the major families of the bloodline that know a fragment of the whereabouts.
And tomorrow at Scone is where it
used to,
supposedly was.
So we'll go more into that, because I've been told a lot about where it might be, because of my fascination with it. Where the Stone of Destiny, the Stone of Scone.
We're going to Scone.
Stone.
Before what you said before.
The Stone of Destiny.
Stone of Destiny.
Yes, which is basically the Lear Fowl of which is the Lear Fowl of Tara. Right. So when the Irish came over and created the Dalriada tribes of the Western Isles, and eventually when they took over the whole of Scotland through Kenneth MacAlpin, we'll tell you all about this tomorrow, they brought it with them as their inauguration stone.
And that's different from the Stone of Scone?
No, it's the same thing.
This is a long story. We haven't got time to go into it. There's actually 3 stones of destiny. So just to confuse you, but I'll tell you all about it.
But we'll tell you why tomorrow.
Just the blind stone figure it
One step at a time.
One step at a
The one
time.
that came from Egypt to Ireland and then...
Probably the Lear Fowl. Yeah.
We'll go into that. There is another stone that was came with Jeremiah.
Yes.
Which is the Jacob's pillow.
And
then there's of course this.
Seen it in the dream.
Yeah. And then there's the sandstone, the block, which is another story, which we're not going to talk about.
Stone.
Yes.
Just to confuse people.
Because that's a great story, and we need to be in the setting tomorrow to talk about it.
Any more?
No, that's it now.
Ancient standing stone in a hedgerow near a crossroads at Wright Houses, Gorebridge, featured in A Guide to Standing Stones and Stone Circles in the south of Scotland. It's a medium-sized stone of pink sandstone with some interesting lichen growth, set in a hawthorn hedge along a minor road to the east of Gorebridge. Local news and gossip has included a startling number of strange events and sightings in the surrounding area, and it seems to be regarded as a UFO hotspot. On the north side of Edinburgh Airport runway is the Cat Stane, with an inscription translated by Sir James Young Simpson in 1861 as "On this mound lies Vetter, the son of Victi." Also in the vicinity, Robert Hutchinson in 1864 uncovered 9 rows of 51 burial cists of various types, further substantiating that up to the Roman period this site was in constant use as a burial ground by different races over several centuries. A tribe known as the Vecturians settled in this area around AD 364, as well as peoples of the Meita and Damnoni tribes. Further excavations in the 1970s, led by Trevor Cowie, uncovered several more prehistoric graves. Numerous tumuli existed around the Cat Stone towards the Huly Hill tumulus, which suggests that before extensive farming and the building of the airport runway, this was a massive and extremely important complex of prehistoric monuments. When viewed from the top of the mound, the streamlined shape of the eastern outlier aligns with Arthur's Seat in the centre of Edinburgh. Graham Gardner, chairman of the British Society of Dowsers, who accompanied us on one of the visits to the site, also pointed out an alignment found by Harry Bell that links the Huli Hill tumulus and the Gorga stone with Edinburgh Castle to the east, and the Cairn Papal tumulus near Bathgate to the west. However, we also discovered an equinoctial line that connects the Huli Hill tumulus with the old parish church at Corstorphine and Arthur's Seat. The church at Corstorphine stands within a circular graveyard, the possible site of a prehistoric henge similar to Arthur's round table at Penrith. We felt sure that the ancestors built the Huli Hill tumulus as a platform to observe the rising sun through the entrance of the henge at Corstorphine, as it rose behind Arthur's Seat during the equinox. Without doubt, Huli Hill is one of Scotland's most important prehistoric monuments. Before reaching Arthur's Seat, the equinoctial line goes through the former Nicholson Street Church, which was completed in 1820. Before reaching Huli Hill, the equinoctial line goes through the Cairn Papal Neolithic Henge monument. This is also on the Holy Axis line. It would seem to be a subconsciously sited church. It's now the Southside Community Education Centre. The Belinus alignment crosses the Firth of Forth, the ancient southern border of Pictland, close to the famous Forth Railway Bridge built between the towns of South and North Queensferry. To the east of it is the small island of Inchcolm, anciently known as Emona. Once it was the Avalon of the ancient Godothin tribe, who regarded it as a sacred abode of the dead, placed to the extreme north of their territory. According to local legend, it was to this holy island that the wounded King Arthur went to receive healing after his final battle. The tribe of the Godothin of Lothian were ruled over by the mythical King Lot, said to be related by marriage to King Arthur. Philip Coppens, in Land of the Gods, believes that Arthur fought many battles alongside Lot against the Angles of Northumbria. The island's reputation as a sacred burial ground continued in the 11th century, when the Danes paid a large sum of gold to have their dead buried here after their defeat by Macbeth at the Battle of Kinghorn. Inchcolm Abbey was dedicated to St. Columba. The island became an important Christian sanctuary from the earliest beginnings of the Culdees in Scotland. Here we find Ellen flowing through the nave, the oldest part of the building dating from the mid-12th century, passing through the old bell tower and across to the magnificent chapter house, an octagonal building erected using sacred proportion.
This island used to be called Emona, and it was the Avalon, as the guy in the boat said, of the east. Yeah, okay. We've got another plane going over. Have you noticed the rocks here? It reminds you of St Michael's Mount. It's because it's a granite island.
But there's amazing rocks there.
And granite, as you know, is a very powerful stone. So that's why this island has its own unique power, and a lot of lines cross here. Ellen Current makes her way from Cramond over there. There's a Roman seaside town, the Roman fort. Comes across here, through the island, through this 8-sided octagonal chapter house, which is one of the gems in Scotland. So go in there and sing, it's fabulous.
The residence.
The residence. It's built on sacred geometry. It's worth having a look at the carvings and the details in there, it's fabulous. But we'd like to show you also the Culdee Chapel, which is a little bit further on, which is the holy centre of the island, and it's by an ancient holy well. And a spring, look at the underground current of water goes underneath the Culdee Chapel.
And there's a well there as well.
And that's where some people say Arthur may have been brought to heal his wounds when he fought a battle in this area. Not the actual Avalon of the myths, but another island healing place where kings in battle would have been brought to.
He got about a bit, didn't he, Arthur?
He did, yes. So remember there was a Scottish Arthur, a Welsh Arthur, a Cornish Arthur, and yeah, so the Scottish Arthur supposedly was healed here in this little chapel. We'll show you afterwards. Yeah, St Columba is supposed to have founded it, so that's quite a illustrious little chapel. Scoticronium, Scoticronicon, is one of the oldest history books in Scotland, and it talks about the foundation myths. That Scotta Pharaoh, daughter of Pharaoh, came to these shores, and then afterwards founded Ireland. Seeded a line of Irish kings, which eventually became kings of Dalriada at Dunnad, and then with them came the Stone of Destiny, and that followed them to Scone, where we're going tomorrow. And then, of course, the stone supposedly was taken from them by King John, and became the coronation stone. Edward I, yeah. So that's the normal story that we have. But now we're giving it back to the Scots now, and it's in Edinburgh Castle Museum. So I think we'll make our way up to the Celtic Chapel after we've had this little talk.
Yes.
I'm going to hand over to Caroline.
I presume there's no standing stones.
No, there's no standing stones.
No,
I mean,
these are natural standing stones.
Yeah. I mean, there might have been a Celtic cross, because of course this was an ancient Culdee settlement, way before St Columba came here. But after Columba, apparently after he established Iona as the religious centre, he came here to found and establish another one in this area. So the actual island is mainly sort of concentrating around him coming here, but there could have been certainly many earlier Culdees that came here before
I remember
him.
The Celtic, so-called Celtic cross, which is Celtic, was a Druid cross.
Could well be, because don't forget St Columba. Yes, he met the Druids, and he considered himself a Druid.
Yeah.
But he was given the task of establishing a new Celtic church. But really, he just continued the teachings of the old Druids, and just tweaked them a bit to suit the more modern age and what was happening at the time.
Well, the Jews knew that Essie was the prophet of the New Age.
Well, many believe the Culdees were from the Holy Land originally.
Essenes.
Yeah, the Essenes, yeah, and they came here at very early times, and they seem to have established far more here in Scotland and parts of northern England than they did anywhere else.
And this is one of their islands.
Yes, but they basically met with the Druids, this is a story, and amalgamated with the Druids and started to build their cells on the Druid sites, or in and around the Druid sites, including Iona, because of course the Druids were on Iona long before St Columba came there, and this was another, who knows, this could be another of the Druid Islands, but there's no traditions of the Druids being here, but it could well be that, I mean, I don't know, Lawrence, you might pick up on that energy here.
I don't know about here, but
yes.
Quite simply, the Druids knew from their prophecies that the new age was coming, the new age of Pisces, sign of the fish, sign of the early followers of the way, not a cross, fish, and that they knew that the prophet of this new age would be called Essie. So they were anticipating Essie. Also, of course, Essie was 1/4 British, and he was brought up as a Druid. His grandmother being Anna of Gwent. This is all part of our history. And the commerce between the Mediterranean and the metal mines in the west was strong. This is why he got the royal house of David, linked by marriage to the British royal families. And the first followers of Essie, of Jesus, when they met in Rome, was in the palace of the Britons, where Caradoc, or Caractacus as you may call him, was kept prisoner. And they met there, and that palace still stands today. And the first bishop of Rome, would you believe, was a British Druid. There was no conflict. There were links between the Essenes and the Druids going way back, and so it's quite natural for them to come here. They knew there was a new age, different way of doing things, and so it's all done peacefully.
Well, of course, naturally, the Augustinians had to then come here and build their abbey during the time of Alexander III. So we're talking, I think the earliest religious stone house here was about 1100, and then, you know, as the different kings came along and poured a little bit more money into the monastery here, it became bigger and grander. But I think the foundations are 13th century of this particular building.
The chapel is older.
Yeah, but the chapter house is from that, you know, where we believe the Augustinians would have chanted, because the resonance, the sound in there, for any singers here, it's a beautiful place to go and just hear the resonating frequencies in there. But where we're taking you now is the earliest building here. This is the cell, similar to the one we saw at Stobo yesterday.
Yeah.
It's
about 22 feet long, just out of
yeah.
Same measurements.
Yeah, and this is where they first came to commune with this very sacred place. And as Gary said, there's a blind stream going underneath, leading from a well that's still there. That's where Ellen's really concentrated her energy on, and it's a very special place to go inside and just feel the energy. So we're going to take you there now.
She also visits a small rectangular stone cell within the Abbey's exquisitely kept garden. Constructed before the Abbey, it has a stone vaulted roof identical to the one at Stobo. This hermitage is one of the oldest relics of Scottish Christianity, a memorial to the visit of the Apostle St. Columba and his disciples. As we tuned into Ellen inside the cell, we also detected a crossing of underground streams beneath us. The intense magnetism of this crossing created, combined with the presence of the powerful female serpent, promotes a potent and heady atmosphere inside the cell, encouraging one to have strong visionary experiences. The interior of the hermit's cell.
The Hills and Charles, they were Druids too.
church at Abercorn. The architecture is mainly 11th century Romanesque, except for the south transept, which has larger stone blocks and roof tiles similar in style to the sanctuary of St Mungo at Stobo, even having an identical circular window. The earthworks of several raised mounds survived in the churchyard, possible remains of the earlier monastery. Belinus was doused passing through the south transept, and the Laird's Loft, built in 1637 at the back of the altar, as a private place of worship for the Earls of Abercorn and Hopetown.
A Coldee cell with the round portal.
Yeah, yes.
If you look at how large the stones are, there'd been a stone roof as well.
Yeah, sorry.
The site of this church and what was there underneath it, the foundations, date back to one of the 400s.
This is St Ninian.
St Ninian's, St Serf, who studied under St Ninian, founded the church here long before Columba. So it's one of the most historical church sites in Scotland, going back before Iona and Lindisfarne. And in this little chapel here are Pictish stones, which you can look at after.
So this was a Pictish.
Yep.
Yeah. So this has gone through many different cultures. So this is the border. This sort of marks the border between the Brythonic Lothians, the Welsh-speaking Lothians, and the Picts. So this piece of religious sacred land was fought over by the Picts and the Welsh. Sometimes it's in the hands of the Picts, sometimes it was in the hands of the Brythonic Welsh, and then eventually the Anglians. So monasteries, there's always been a monastery here. So from the earliest time a Coldee cell, and then as the different cultures came, they would build a much bigger religious site. This is really, really important for many cultures. This little tiny area. I mean, you can see how we came down this long winding lane. But we're right next to the Forth here. Oh yeah. This is we're right by the Forth here. So we just come further along from where we've just come off the ferry, heading west along the Forth. So we're very, very. This is right where they would have landed. The earliest missionaries, the old Coldees, they would have landed here on their little boats to establish a site here. So really we wanted to bring you here. This is where we find Belinus again, the current. So this is a Belinus church. Hopefully it's open, it usually is, so have a look inside. But also the Pictish stones in here are lovely. There's also a few Celtic crosses and some hogback stones. So both places are fascinating to have a look around.
And why is it raised over there?
Well, that's, again, it could be a Pictish burial ground.
Yes, they're like large tumuluses.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's quite a few little humps and bumps that could well have been, sort of tumuluses at one point or another. So this is a really sacred ground.
What happened to the Picts, Caroline?
Good question. I mean,
they never went away.
No, they're still walking the streets today.
They actually spoke.
And I speak to a
Brittonic.
lot of people who are Picts.
Yes.
They're like Welsh. They were not Gaelic.
Yeah.
They were just
native.
wilder and older.
Yes.
Britons.
Yes. Yes.
Native people from the Alba.
I mean, they could be. We believe they might have been Indo-Europeans.
Oh.
That came across and settled in that part of the world, part of the north.
The relief carving is interesting because it's unique to the Picts. Cutting away so that a picture forms instead of carving it out.
Oh.
But no, there's only that bit.
Yeah, but the writers of the Pictish peoples, saying they never went away. They were just amalgamated into the race we know today as the Scots. But just like the Italians, they're made of different races from Etruscans, Romans, and Latins. Different tribes who all amalgamated under one race. I mean, yes, and even Viking. The Vikings. But of course the Scots are said to have intermarried, and the point is it went through the female line of the Picts. So the Irish kings would marry the the Pictish princesses. But the Pictish princesses chose who they wanted to marry. That was the point, to establish, you know, a good male line.
Did they have painted faces?
They were big into
It's only tattoos.
Tomorrow we're going into Pictish
someone
land.
that comes from picture, you know.
Well,
funny
painted
word, isn't
people, but I mean, you know, they don't even know if Picti was the right word for them.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, it's all a myth. Not, you know, their history's long been wiped away, sadly.
But isn't the Roman writings to say, because the Romans christened,
Yes.
isn't there not things that they describe them as being what is tattooed?
Painted, painted people.
Tattooed.
Yeah. But they encountered many tribes, you see, not just the Picts.
So the
yeah.
British daddy painted people.
But they're at Blue
Yeah.
Road.
Blue Road, yeah.
So it stops here.
Yeah. No, the Picts wouldn't give up.
Yeah.
But they were the land worshipping, you
And
know,
their land
tribes.
meant a lot,
Yes,
they
totally.
There was a
The
great
young
link.
people today are looking more like the Picts.
Yeah.
They're painted people.
They want to be Celts again, you
There was a
know.
great link between the Picts.
Yes, gone
If you
back.
take their tribal centre, maybe it's Inverness or Clavercairns, between the Pictish kingdom there, or queendom, and the kingdom of Gwynedd. Because it was recorded, well known, that Malcolm Gwynedd in the 6th century, in the 530s and 40s, was requested by the Queen of the Picts to come up and service her and give her offspring. And Malcolm is now a modern name Malcolm, so you'll find a few Malcolms in the king list in Scotland. And because Gwynedd was liberated from the Irish invaders in about 425 AD by Cinedfa Eledig, who came down from Manor Godolphin, which is roughly where we are now, in the bit north. Best bet is Clackmannanshire. But you had this tribal movement, and the reason they came to Gwynedd because they were linked, going back, family links between this area and Gwynedd. So they rescued their compatriots in Gwynedd from those Southern Irish invaders.
Right, so enjoy. Have a look at the stones over there and the stones in here. Dunfermline, one of the major sort of sites on the Spine of Albion, along with Winchester. This was a capital. This is the old capital of Scotland before Edinburgh. At a period when Winchester was also at its height of power. So you imagine that this was the royal and spiritual capital of Scotland. At the same time, Winchester was the royal and spiritual capital of England. Both connected this line, which also goes down to Fontevraud Abbey, which was also a spiritual centre of France at the time as well. So it was a very powerful line at that time, around sort of 1060, 1080.
Yeah, actually 1050 it started. Yeah, 1050, because Malcolm, this is the reason this became the royal centres, because Malcolm III, who was descended from Kenneth MacAlpin, who was originally born at the original, it's very complicated, the original palace of the kings of Scotland was called Teviot, which is on the Bolinas line. This is west of here, and for some reason Malcolm, who was born at Fort Teviot in the palace there, decided to make Dunfermline the new royal centre, religious and political and royal centre. At the same time that William the Conqueror arrived in England and built his palace on the Spine of Albion down in Winchester. So it's an interesting connection. the other connection is that with William the Conqueror is that you know, a lot of the like the Sinclairs of Roslin came over with William the Conqueror, who then came to Scotland and, you know, created Roslin Chapel and all their very important centres too. So something was going on at that time, more than we realise. The other thing, of course, is that Malcolm married Margaret, who was the princess of the Atheling kings, the Saxon kings, who were banished from England at the time of Canute and sent across to France. So they were the exiled kings. Her brother supposedly tried to come back and rule, and then of course William the Conqueror arrived, and that was that. But she was destined to marry Malcolm. She came here along with one of the St. Clairs from Roslin, who accompanied her, and they married in a little church that was on this site in 1056. So, you know, we're talking about, you know, quite early on, and that church was originally on a cold east site. So this is originally a very early cold east site. It would have been a cell similar to the ones you've seen at Stobo, and the one at we saw again at where we were yesterday, Abercorn yesterday. You know, these little cells. So and then it became a larger monastic community, and then.
That's probably the cell there, just right in the middle.
Yeah, possibly could be. Same route. Yeah. So you know, this has always been a really important site. As I say, going back, we talked about the Condies, who they possibly were. So when Margaret came here, they were married in the original church before this was ever built. And then later, their son built a much grander abbey, and then of course it flourished from there on in. But what's interesting is that Malcolm and Margaret produced a whole dynasty of kings, and their daughter Matilda married Henry I, who was William the Conqueror's son, of England. They produced a daughter called Matilda, who went on to marry Geoffrey of Anjou, and she bore Henry II of England. So between them, they created a whole dynasty of kings stretching right down to, you know, throughout Britain. So this couple, who not only married on a node, because there's a node point of Alan and Berlinus here, but we'll take you to another site where they then had their nuptials on the other node in a tower. So this is not just one node; it's two nodes here in Dunfermline, plus the alignment that goes straight through the abbey. So this is very unusual to have the Spine of Albion and the two currents in one place.
Just to check that, we're going to the other.
Yeah, we'll go to the tower. Yes,
we're not walking there.
Yeah, no, yeah. The tower. No, the tower is just around the corner.
Oh, right.
Yeah. So it's what we'll be doing now is a little walking tour around Dunfermline. It's all within close proximity, and we've got Pit and Creek Park just below here, which is where the tower is. Also Wallace's Well. We've got the Tower Burn. The little windy river that goes through, and then we'll take you to where the alignment goes further across through the city chambers, and a very interesting plaque.
And the carvings, yeah.
And the carvings. So, do you want to just talk about what's inside the abbey?
Yeah, I'll just say, the spirits of Malcolm and Margaret haunt this palace and the abbey, and it's said that if Scotland's in its hour of need, Margaret and Malcolm will ride out of the vaults and rescue Scotland. So rather like King Arthur and his knights, the energy has been sort of transfixed to them. But really this abbey is all about Robert the Bruce, the greatest hero of Scotland. In fact, he's like the modern day King Arthur to all the Scottish. He sort of rescued Scotland, beating the English at Bannockburn, and his body lies right next to the node point.
No, a wee tiny part of his body.
Yes. The same with Margaret. There's not much left. But there's part of Robert the Bruce, and of course we know his heart's at Melrose, and all bodies, all saints are all sort of taken apart and sold off or given to other abbeys.
Well, and her head.
And Margaret's head belonged to Mary Queen of Scots at one time, was kept with her right through her latter years. We're going to look at the Shrine of Margaret. It just sticks out on this sort of west end of the cathedral there.
East end.
East end, sorry.
And that's where the two currents start. This is where you'll find the two currents as they make their way into the node point. And when you go inside the abbey, the node point is very close to the plaque that states that this is where some of Robert the Bruce lies, and it's the site of the ancient old high altar of the old church that was here before the abbey. So there's no, again, no coincidence that the node is there, but it's very close to the body or the remains of Robert the Bruce.
It makes you wonder why they didn't move his body to Edinburgh and why it's still here. And I think somehow it's still a spiritual capital of Scotland in some way. A lot of people disagree with me. I think it's the same with Winchester. That was the spiritual capital of England, but the power's been transferred to London. And with that comes a new sort of configuration of London, Edinburgh and Cardiff as a lunation triangle. Which is a fixing triangle, so make what you will of that. But it's all about fixing the energy of the capitals for control, whereas the spiritual capitals were more in the sort of lay of the land, in the spine of the country, the geographical longest geographical line that can be struck through Britain has Dunfermline and Winchester on it. So the old capitals, the Celts knew where to build in harmony with the landscape. And that determined the success of the town, I think, and its layout, having the north, south, east, west streets with the energy to flow, all these things which we talk about in the Parish Centre is very important for the success of the town and its people and the health and wealth of everybody. So we're going to have a look at Margaret's Shrine and go into the Abbey and have a look around.
St Margaret. Yeah. Is it on? Yeah. Yes, I don't know if you heard me, but yes, this is one of the most revered shrines in the whole of Europe at during medieval times. People came from far and wide to revere it and her remains. But as I say, there's nothing here today. After the Reformation, they actually rescued both Malcolm and Margaret's, what was left of them, their remains, and took them to Spain. And apparently by Philip of Spain, and since then they've apparently disappeared. So nobody knows where they are, where they rest today, but probably somewhere secret. And yes, yeah,
Under Roslin chapel.
Yeah. So as I say, both you've got Ellen Current coming this way, Bellina's coming from behind me, and they're both heading into the Abbey at this point. Unfortunately, some of you might remember in the book we mentioned St Margaret's Cave, which is a cave just further on from here in a car park. It used to be a cave that was in a deep gorge, and the pilgrims used to have to climb up the gorge to get into the mouth of the cave. This is where St Margaret apparently used to go and pray, and inside this cave. Of course, now that's all been the gorge is no longer there. It was all filled in with rubble, so it was completely flattened, and then eventually a car park has been built over the whole thing. And when we first started to discover the Spine of Albion through Dunfermline, the cave was open, and so there was a little door at the end by the side of the car park that you could go down these steps to the cave, and there was a polystyrene model of Saint Margaret praying at this little altar deep down in this cave. And it was so highly paramagnetic there that our compass was just spinning around and round and round.
Paramagnetic.
Yeah, very much so, because this is very highly paramagnetic sandstone here. So, but sadly it's closed. So we would have loved to have taken you there, but that was one of her favourite places. Dunfermline has lots of little secrets. I don't know how much we're going to be able to see of the Abbey, because apparently some of it could be closed, yeah. So, but anyway, cross fingers, we'll be able to see the important bits.
And wasn't Margaret's remains here in a wooden casket at one point?
Yeah, that's right. Because originally it was inside the abbey, and then they brought it to this point later. So this was also part of the old abbey.
Is this actually the original base of the shrine?
Yeah, yes, yeah.
These
Yeah.
are the walls of the
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, right. Oh, right. They just somehow blocked her off.
Well, you know, after the Reformation,
Yes,
you know,
exactly. That's what happened.
yeah,
Any Catholic shrine.
yes, yeah.
These stones are full of fossils.
I mean, they're huge blocks, aren't they? They're,
Especially chosen.
yeah,
Full of fossils. Absolutely full of fossils.
Point where she's not contributed there, this was the name they had the
yes,
stone on which
yes, yeah. It's just remains of her shrine.
Marble.
Durham.
Ellen passes through this doorway. Robert the Bruce's shrine, node of Ellen and Belinus. A replica of the original shrine of Robert the Bruce. Tomb of William Shaw, who created the statutes for Freemasonry in Scotland.
Malcolm and Margaret. They built these as the royal apartments on this site, I should say, and it was then extended and expanded over the years by various kings, and then James the Sixth of Scotland, first of England, built it as a very grand palace, as you can see. What remains of it, vast palace, and this is where Charles I and his sister Elizabeth were born. Right here in this palace.
So Charles I.
Yeah.
When he lost his head.
Yeah. And what's interesting is, going back to Malcolm, he was, as I say, born in Forteviot, which is on the Mail Current west of here, but he was inaugurated at Scone before he built this as his political royal centre, where we're going later. So it's all, you know, see how it's all linked in with the energies of, you know, the old Pictish palace where all the old kings and where Malcolm was born should be on the Mail Current, and they should come here on the alignment and on a node. And you know, it's yeah, it's all linked in. They seem to know something about the energies, and we know why that is. You know, harnessing the energies for their own control. So they control, not for the greater good. It was to command control for their dynasties.
They wouldn't, would they?
So now, when we got everybody together, oh, here we are, we're going to go down to the tower where the other node is sited, and where Malcolm and Margaret went to after their marriage ceremony here, and yes, got up to all sorts of things.
Yeah, the public,
yes,
the ancient ritual.
Yeah, the ancient ritual, the Great Rite, which is basically a continuation of the ancient kings would go to these sacred places and marry themselves to the land, and it's to the earth goddess. But it was actually seeking revering the earth goddess in order for him to reign as a good king. But of course all that was sort of later usurped. But that was this ritual of the goddess Margaret and, you know, the sun god Malcolm doing that on the node here. So it was a sort of form of that ancient marriage ritual of marrying the king to the land.
No one's saying the word consummation. I wonder why not.
Because
Well,
we knew you'd say it.
Yes. Okay, it was a sexual rite. You know, that's what it was.
Is there any history of any footprint stone when they actually did the ceremony? Because there's got a lot of footprint stones.
Yeah.
Is there one?
Not there,
It's gone.
but sadly, you know, it's there's nothing left of the tower. It's just this, literally the footings.
Oh, is it? Right,
Yeah,
okay.
But
yeah.
there's a meeting of other energies.
Yes, there's a lot of meeting of energies, including two serpents that we happened to pick up at St Andrew's Cathedral when we were there at St Andrew's, and we picked up two serpents that we followed all the way here to the tower. Yeah, and we named them Margaret and Malcolm. Yeah, and they meet Williness and Ellen at this point, at that no point we're about to go to.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. You've got four separate. You've got two female dragons and two male dragons.
Aye.
So we've got to differentiate.
But that's separate from.
She loops around.
Not really,
She loops around.
I'm actually on.
So she's going through the well there. So she's looping. Yes.
King Malcolm Canmore's Tower. City Chamber. The alignment passes through this spot. Scone Palace.
Inauguration place of 38 kings, going back to Pictish times. So this is a seriously important site, and it's another node of Ellen and Belinus. But you know, surprise, surprise. Yay. So this is again, but also the main thing of this place is the Stone of Destiny. The coronation stone, the stone of Scone, whatever you like to call it. Gary's going to tell you a little bit about that because he's been doing research on that for many years as to what it really was, what they really had at Westminster under the throne, what came back to Edinburgh. Oh, it's a great mystery and a great story. So, as I say, this was a Pictish site, first and foremost, and this was a great mound. And of course, over the years, it's been gently levelled and levelled. So just to say that all the great families, the Earls of Gowrie, and other great families owned this until the Murrays were gifted it during the time of James VI, and then they became the Earls of Mansfield, and they still own it today. So what was here first was the mound, and where the Picts actually crowned their kings, the inauguration place, and there was a Pictish stone that once stood on the mound, and which was their focus of ceremony. That has long gone, so we're not sure where that is. Yes, it disappeared at the Reformation. Then a chapel, a medieval chapel, was built on the site when the Augustinian canons came here and built their abbey. So we'll be going to the abbey site as well, because Ellen goes through there. There's nothing left of it. Yeah, it's just over there. But luckily we were here on the day that Glasgow University was doing a geophys survey and found just where the high altar was, where Ellen came through. It was complete. We knew where she was, and they said that's where the high altar was. We were, wow, because there's nothing there now. It's completely obliterated. So that was very exciting for us to have that confirmed. And then Belinus and Ellen, as I say, they meet on the mound. He skims the southern east edge of the palace. This was the old abbot's house. So it was the abbot's house, then it became a mansion, and then as the different great families took it over, as I say, the Murrays, who are a branch of the Earls of Athol, where you'll be going to tomorrow, hopefully, cross fingers. And so this is their seat, and so they created this grand mansion. But as I say, this is where Belinus comes through. Ellen's going through the old abbey site, and they meet here.
On top of the mound.
Yeah. So the kings that were crowned here, going back to the Picts, was the king of Alba, Kenneth MacAlpin, who brought the Scots and the Picts together as one. He was inaugurated here. So was Robert the Bruce. So was Macbeth, and so was Charles II, along with many, many more. So, shall we go there first?
Would you like to side to the abbey first?
Yes, while it's not raining. Yeah, and then if it's raining, you can then skip inside. This is a mausoleum of the Earls of Mansfield now. So the old chapel, medieval chapel's long gone, and this has been replaced by their, right on the no point, their mausoleum. And they node inside. And do you see where that stone is with the cross? Sword coming out of it. That is where the old inauguration site, that's what the stone they used to be inaugurated from, and that's a replica of the Stone of Destiny, Scone Soon, the coronation stone that originally stood there, but we believe actually it stood on the top of the mound originally, and where the two currents cross. So what would happen for the Norman kings, when the abbey was then built in Norman times, the Norman kings would be inaugurated on the mound, on the stone, and then paraded to the abbey to be crowned. So that's how it worked in Norman times. But before then, the kings were inaugurated and crowned on the mound. So, as I say, there's absolutely nothing left of it. All we've got is a rough idea of where it was based on the University of Glasgow findings about 10 years ago.
Is the wall part of the original? That looks
Was this
strange.
the old altar?
A lot of the stones.
This is the old altar.
Pardon?
This is the old altar.
Yeah, old high altar of the Norman Abbey. Yeah.
Where Robert the Bruce would have been crowned.
Yeah, so where they went onto the so they got inaugurated on the mound.
I remember it well.
They got inaugurated on the mound and came to the high altar to be crowned. So they knew what they were doing with the energies. So
and 1872 is a significant day.
Yeah, yeah. It's similar in.
That's when Rangers were founded.
So this was similar to. Gary, can you tell us a bit? Yes, I think. This was similar to Winchester, where William the Conqueror built the palace. And he then rebuilt the cathedral in Winchester. So his palace was on the alignment, and the cathedral on the nodes in Winchester. Don't forget, all connected in with Scone, and they were inaugurated on the alignment within the palace, and then processed to the node point for the crowning. And it was the opposite way around here. But they all sort of connected in with the energies. They seemed to know what they were doing. And actually, just here, there's another male energy, not Belina's, intersecting with Ellen at this point.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
There's a line going out towards the Mercat Cross.
Yes.
Which is on a mound, which looks quite interesting too.
Yeah.
That's another line coming in.
Yeah. And then beyond here, we haven't got time to do this, but if you want to come back, there's a lovely maze further down. Further down. Sorry, my bearings. And yes, and she goes through the maze. She seems to like the maze, and then comes up here, and then we'll meet her again on the Moot Hill, just here. And as I say, the male current's clipping the edge of the palace, the old abbot's house, and then goes to the Moot Hill.
There were actually people who could write at the time when Robert the Bruce was being crowned, and they actually wrote that the actual Stone of Destiny, or the Lia Fal, the Stone of Scone, was a black shining stone, and had carvings on it like hieroglyphs, and which sort of clash with what historians are saying. It's a lump of limestone.
No, sandstone.
Sandstone, sorry, from Scone here, because when they actually received the stone back into Edinburgh from, was it John Major's government handed it back? They analysed it to be a local sandstone here from Perthshire, because most of the stone in this area comes from huge quarries in this. Even Dunfermline Abbey is built from Perthshire sandstone. So that was a bit of a mystery. So lots of people have been trying to research where this black shining marble-like stone came from, And we took it all the way back to the Temple of Karnak in Egypt.
Yes.
And Akhenaten himself had started off this new religion of worshipping one god called the Aten, the sun god. And he built a temple, and part of that temple was the mansion of the Benben. And this was a sacred stone that was seen as the seed of the gods. And it was a metallic stone, black metallic, and basically a meteorite that had come to the earth, because Ben means seed. And so it's like the seed of life, and even today scientists think that perhaps, you know, meteorites played their part in seeding life on Earth. But the Egyptians had this stone, the Ben stone, as their most sacred stone long before Akhenaten. In the earliest times, from the Temple of On, it's said to be a stone that landed in Egypt on a mound that was surrounded by water, and that area was supposed to be where the pyramids were sited today. So Akhenaten had kept this stone until the time when the priests of Amun tried to sort of oust him out, and so with his daughter they escaped Egypt. Akhenaten's body has never been found, so we don't know what happened to him, whether he died in Egypt or not. We don't know.
He became Moses.
So some say he became Moses, some say he actually came as far as the British Isles, and he's buried secretly somewhere. But
We've seen Mount Carningly.
yes, we're going to move on. Okay, so basically the Scots, well, okay, John and I, my old friend that talked about in the Paris Centre, we came here to do some research of what this black stone was, and we discovered that a really old school teacher who lived in the village of Scone here, who said it's been taught for centuries that the stone was hidden in the river when King John came to take the Stone of Destiny.
King Edward I.
King Edward I, sorry, yeah. I'm getting mixed up with that too. And so what Edward took away with him was actually a cesspit cover, which they took out of the abbey.
From this abbey.
And with the two rings either side, that was what they used to lift out.
So a rectangular block.
Yes.
That they reckoned that the monks said, well, he doesn't know what it looks like. They knew he was coming, and the story is that they gave him that instead of the true stone.
And then we have to say, well, where is the true Stone of Destiny? Well, it was said that they were rediscovered in Huly Hill, which is up in North Perthshire here, Macbeth's Fort, or Macbeth's Hill. Apparently in the 19th century, two estate workers from the Sinclair estate found in a kind of landslide a cavern, and inside the cavern they came across this chamber, and in this chamber was this black metallic stone with Egyptian hieroglyphs on it and carvings, and these bronze discs next to them. And they immediately sort of took it out for, and the story goes that it was put on a train to London to be examined by the British Museum, which seems very unlikely. Well, it never arrived at the British Museum, so we don't know what happened to the stone. But talking to John Ritchie, the present-day Knights Templars, they say, well, actually there was three Stone of Destinies. There's the one from Ireland, which is said to be the Lia Fal. There is also the Stone of Jeremiah, the Jacob's Pillow, and the other one was a stone of the Tuatha De Dan, which was one of the 13 treasures. So we've got three stones kicking about, and they said one of them the Knights Templars still have. The other one is being kept, the proper one, the metallic, meteoritic one, has been hidden, possibly behind a waterfall, as some say, or near water. And that the leading families like the Sinclairs, the Campbells, they all have a clue to its whereabouts, and they have to come together with all the clues to actually reveal it. But they're not going to bring the stone out into the open until Scotland becomes totally independent again. That's the story. So we're still waiting for that to happen.
So not only were the kings of England crowned on a cesspit cover, but the cesspit cover, of course, during the Second World War was stolen, supposedly. I don't know if you know the story. There's a film made of it by some Edinburgh University students. They broke it when they were moving it, but they successfully, absconded it abducted it from the Westminster Cathedral. So anyway, when it was given back by John Major, this big ceremony, they reckon that it was taken away. Another replica was made of the cesspit cover, and that was what was given. That's what's now, you know, they think that, anyway, it's all very complicated, but it's all...
So that's what's in Edinburgh?
Yes, probably a replica of the cesspit cover from here.
I'll just say one thing. I had the pleasure in actually touching the real cesspit cover, which was placed in the church at Dull, which is in the Glen Lyon, not far from Fortingall, and that was the Knights Templar Church. And the Knights Templar invited John and I, because we've been researching for years, to that chapel. And there, in this great iron cage, was this piece of Perthshire sandstone,
which was the original.
Which was the original cesspit cover with a proper crack in it and everything. So, yeah, that's, and they believed that was their stone of power, but we knew better.
It was a manuring experience.
So now we're going to go to the Moot Hill, because
there's some people actually say that this is the real one in plain sight.
So I don't. You see that bell hanging from that tree? Yeah. So the saying is, when the bell of Scone tolls, the law of the land has been made. In other words, this mound was, I'll read this out to get it right, a statement of the great significance of the ceremonies held at Scone and the judgments made on top of this Moot Hill. So this is where the laws of the land were made, as well as the king being inaugurated. So it was also known as Boot Hill, as in boot. And that's come from an ancient tradition when all the lords and barons of the land had to come here and swear fealty to the king, and what they'd do is they'd carry with them in their boots soil from their own kingdoms
and then sort of empty it.
And empty it, yes, here on the mound. Wow. And that's where that comes from. So they would stomp onto the mound with soil in their boots from their own lands. Yeah.
The Druidic.
Yes. Exactly, and actually it's very Etruscan too. That goes way back to the Etruscans of Italy, that this is what they did. They brought the soil from their own lands to the central shrine of the sort of 12 kingdoms. So that's quite interesting. So as you can see, Kenneth MacAlpin, King Constantine II, Malcolm III, who we've just met at Dunfermline, Robert the Bruce, Macbeth, and Charles II.
James
you can see it. Many kings were inaugurated, not crowned here, inaugurated. And but once upon a time, before all of this was here, there was a great ditch that surrounded this hill. So it shows that it was always, going back probably to the Bronze Age, a ceremonial place of all the early cultures. Yeah, and who knows, it might even have had a few standing stones, but nothing of that is said or remains. So this is where Ellen and Belinus meet, inside the chapel.
Not here.
Here.
In the chapel.
In the chapel. So we think that this was probably on that point at some point. Yeah. Because this is recent. This is a mausoleum of the Mansfield, so it's not old.
But it has a crypt underneath with another entrance in the side of this hill, which you can't get into and see what's there.
Right, it's past. You've got 10 minutes. So anybody who wants to use the loos, I suggest they're through there. So, and then you meet at the entrance.
Ceremony, photo. Was this where you were thinking? Before they walked off, we're going to have a ceremony here.
Well, I think people want to use the loos. See, they're just for the loos. So we have time on.
And we're going to go down steps, and that takes us towards the Burnham Oak. But before we go that way, if we're going to pass a square to the right here, my rights and the lefts are terrible. To the right here, we're going to pass a square, and the square leads us on to the cathedral. So it would be good to go and see the oak, then come back and then do the, because there's some amazing yew trees on the way to the cathedral, and they're just phenomenal. But I'll tell you something else when we get down to the Burnham Oak. So we're walking. We're just. Do you want to add anything?
Just want to add in. Not only was Dunkeld an important centre, it was a royal, very important royal centre of the Picts for a long time.
Yeah.
And then it became a royal centre for the Caledonians, where you get the word Caledonia from, which is associated with Scotland, obviously. And the word Dunkeld could come from the word Dun Caledon, which means Dun means fortress, stronghold, so it could mean the stronghold of the Caledonians, or another theory is it's Dunkeld, Dunkeld, meaning the stronghold of the Culdees, which were Druidic, an early Druidic mystical race, a cult with a mystical religion. So that's very important. A royal centre, just like Dunfermline yesterday was a royal centre. That's how important.
And again, it's the Culdees.
The young pretender.
Taking your pictures.
I'll do it down. Wow. Over 1,000 years old, I would guess.
At one time, guys, this, I mean, as you can see, there is a lot of trees here. Planted the trees here.
Oh, planted them himself?
And,
wow.
well, not himself. You know, he got them planted, you know what I mean? But this, as I say, is one of the, I mean, this one was planted 300 years ago, but McAlpine,
this tree could be 300 odd years. He was 800 AD, wasn't he?
Right, well, he was supposed to have been the one that started planting trees here, so that makes you think.
That makes sense. 843, wasn't he, Kenneth McAlpine?
Yeah.
At 1130 years.
Yeah, now.
1914, 1917, we're nearly there.
Right, well, to me that's not 300 years old. That's older.
Well, you can all have a douse and see what the average age is.
That would be interesting, but guys,
everybody pay attention.
The actual oak is this one here.
That's the sycamore.
And it turns out it's actually had an accident since the last time I was here. There's quite a chunk came away from it, but this tree actually came way down on this side, and it looks like that's been why they've been checking it to see if it's okay. You can actually go inside this tree. Stupidly somebody's tried to set it on fire.
They do that round
but thankfully they didn't get it. So this is our original one, and we will go there just now, but I mean this is phenomenal and this has got to be seen.
And do you know why it's called the Young Pretender?
If you want to douse,
please
douse the tree.
Did he come here or something?
Keep it to yourself.
He was supposed to have been in
Dunkeld. We'll pull our ages
at one
together
point.
and see how close we are, see what the average age is, all right?
Sorry,
is it on the? Is it on the?
About 100 years.
When everyone stops talking, I think you should say that to everyone. It's interesting about Bonnie Prince Charlie.
Yeah.
Is it on the current? Is it on the?
Well, I'll tell you that now as well.
All right.
All right. The first thing.
I didn't know that. Yeah. And if you pay attention to the tree, I mean, I don't know about you, but I actually see faces in it. And, you know, I get all kinds of things looking at the trees.
1,130. This one is 1,080 years.
According to myth, who knows, Shakespeare's Macbeth was supposed to have been based on this tree. That's where the idea came from, but whether that's true or not, we don't know. You know, but Macbeth obviously being the one who, I'll tell you the story, refers to the prophecy told by Macbeth by the three witches, which led him to believe that he was impenetrable to defeat, you know, that he couldn't be defeated, encouraging him to murder his way to the throne of Scotland. And according to the play, the prediction comes true when Malcolm III's forces attacked Macbeth and his army at the Dunsany Hill, using branches from the tree of Burnham Wood as camouflage. And in reality, Malcolm Canmore killed Macbeth in 1058, which is interesting, during the Battle of
Lunfannon in Aberdeenshire.
How good are you?
I practiced it on the...
And Shakespeare portrays him as a mad yet tragic ruler. But history disputes this myth, obviously.
He was probably neither mad nor tragic. And let's get the quote, the quote from Macbeth is, Macbeth shall never vanquish the bee until great Birnam Wood to hide Dunsane Hill shall come against him. So Macbeth thought, well, that can't come against me because it's a wood. It can't move against me. What they did was they hid in the woods, and that's how they got him.
Aye.
So it did come against
Now
him.
the thing, there's a smaller church on this line, the little Dunkeld, right? And so I mean, this is supposed to have been the original church, you know, that the Picts put there. Sorry, my bag's in you.
No, it's okay.
But it comes from it starts here at the Birnam Oak, it goes through into the little Dunkeld, then it crosses over the Tay and it goes to the cathedral. So that, you know, the line actually, and then it goes away up from here to the King's Seat, which is further up on the hills. There's a lot of cup mark stones in the hills round here, quite a few. From what I'm here, I mean, they say that there's one area up near Dunkeld, but in actual fact, this whole area is fully cup marks.
And we all know what cup marks and stones are for, don't we?
No, we don't.
Because we all read our newsletter, don't we? And it was there in the last issue at Lillis of Davy Cohen's article. You all read it. It's about cup marks. So you're experts now. You all read your newsletters, don't you?
Yeah. So
it's to trap bad spirit.
So by the 9th century, apparently, by the 9th century, Dunkeld marked the heart of a newly combined Pictish-Scottish state. And it was a geographical centre of a kingdom, and it was important to the early Celts when establishing their territory. You know, it was a naval source of connection between the upper and lower worlds. And it was the nourishment, like the umbilical cord, that connects us to the womb of the mother. You know, so we were very grounded then at that time. And at this time, Kenneth MacAlpine established Dunkeld as the ecclesiastical capital of the Kings of Alba. And it remained as a significant religious centre for hundreds of years, attracting constant strife, particularly from the Danes, who raided the area in the 10th and 11th centuries, and they plundered the cathedral, taking all the precious relics. So you wonder where they all went, you know, where did all these relics go? But as I say, Birnam Hill on the south of Dunkeld is on the Highland boundary fault, is one of Britain's biggest faults, runs through here and it splits the Highlands and the Lowlands. And it goes all the way to Arran, Isle of Arran, on the west coast to Stonehaven, just south of Aberdeen, and of course the cup mark stones are there. Now, Burnham Village on the west bank of the Tay, Ellen visits the Scottish Episcopal Church of St Mary, which stands, we passed it when we were coming in, we saw the church, and it stands on the site of the ancient preaching cross, where pilgrims knelt in prayer next to the west bank of the River Tay.
So Ellen goes through the tree, and then to the church.
Yep. So let's get this clear.
And then it goes to the cathedral.
It's what, sorry?
Ellen Serpent goes through this tree, and then through the church we pass, and then to the cathedral.
Yeah, and to the cathedral.
Right.
So it's not the Bellinus line here, it's the Ellen female errand
over there.
I can see the line there.
And it's coming to the cathedral as well, but it's over there. We haven't come as far as Bellinus yet.
The male one,
yes.
is that?
That's right, so the female Ellen current goes through this tree.
So the two lines cross at the cathedral.
At the cathedral. That's the female current and the male current cross. And one other important point
Go on, I'm listening.
is that Dunkeld was considered the gateway to the Highlands.
Yeah.
Because it fed the lowlands from the Highlands.
Lawrence, behave.
We just said Dunkeld is a gateway to the Highlands.
Right, we've just got more information on the dating. We've had 3 dates and we're getting a rough average of 1,200 years for the tree.
How much did you get?
1,200. I got 1080, but 1,220 is.
Well, it was supposed to have been Kenneth MacAskill.
I was going to say, it comes to the time of Kenneth MacAlpine when he would have planted it.
But did I call it? Right.
843.
So, Little Dunkeld Church, the 18th century, had been a place of worship for centuries and held the status of the mother church of the parish until the 16th century. And many believed, rather than the cathedral, that this little church stands on the site of the Chaldee settlement. And in fact, the present church still houses a Celtic bell. And linear mounds found nearby may be the remains of the outer walls of the old Christian settlement. Now, what else do I want to tell you?
Can you also just quickly say why you think that's called, the tree's called the Young Pretender, which nobody's asked about, strangely?
Oh, aye, right, good point. Now, where are we? Wait a minute, because I've seen it here as well. Basically, the Young Pretender is connected to Bonnie Prince Charlie, and Bonnie Prince Charlie was down in this area. The Jacobites were in this area as well. Now, the brilliant thing I read that I loved was that Gary and Caroline had actually been here at one point and discovered that the line seemed really quite mucked up. And it turned out they picked up on battles which had occurred with the Jacobites, and they had come from the Killiecrankie, and they were fighting. Now let me go and find it. Where are we? Because I've went ahead of myself there. The Cameronians. Yes. And it was a bloody battle, and it was right in the centre of Dunkeld. They actually were attacked in the cathedral. So really thankful to Caroline and Gary that they did healing on the lines. But what I thought, and it's entirely up to yourselves, especially with everything that's happened, there is a wee area just down here which is on the Tay, which is probably on the line, which you can check to see. But I thought it would be nice if we just all gathered there and maybe done do some kind of healing up the line. See, it's got Masonic symbols, dragons, and it replaced the old market cross, and it's here in 1745. The old naval of the town, Bonnie Prince Charlie, proclaimed his father king, while mustering more troops to march south to Preston to meet the English. So, as I say, there's loads of Masonic symbolism in there.
Sorry, I missed that because I've been last
So it replaced the cross, the Celtic cross?
Celtic?
Yeah.
So it's called Celtic?
No, it doesn't say it replaced the cross. Oh, I replaced the old market cross, I beg your pardon.
Oh, the old market cross.
The old market cross.
So that may have been something
Pictish,
yeah.
Where was the old market cross? Just out of interest?
Yeah.
So it's same venue.
Are we all together in one group? Come on,
As I say, there's going to be a wedding.
Here, the Ellen current crosses with the male Belinus current, not the line, not the ley, but the current. The ley goes past the cathedral, not through it. But the currents are crossing somewhere here, and some of us think it's here because of one thing: the mushrooms and toadstools seem to be marking an area off, which is distinctive. There's trees everywhere, but the toadstools are only here. So that's why we've stopped here. So see if you can feel the lines crossing as I read this. Okay, I'm going to read about the cathedral. Dunkeld Cathedral is a node point crossing of lines, that means. Belinus current flows down east-west axis and meets the Ellen's north-south flow in the present church to form a node, with the Belinus current at the high altar of the cathedral, of what is now, of the Dunkeld's parish church, which is nearby. This is also the exact site of the old Culdee church dedicated to St Ninian, and later St Columba, the archdruid who embraced Christianity. Kenneth MacAlpin was the first to establish a monastery on the site to house the relics of St Columba and the Stone of Destiny after the Vikings sacked the Isle of Iona. 24 St Columba's miracles were said to have been inscribed over the high altar. It soon became the main church of southern Scotland, of all southern Scotland, due to its status as one of the most important places of pilgrimage in all of northern Britain. Given the status of a cathedral, not just a church, a cathedral by King David I, son of Malcolm and Margaret. We saw Margaret yesterday in the cathedral in Dunfermline. Son of Malcolm and Margaret in 1127 and run by Augustinian canons from Rome. Then the construction of a grander cathedral dedicated to St Columba, remember the archdruid, who embraced Christianity. It was begun in 1260 by the Bishop William Sinclair.
St Clair's again.
St Clair's again, yes. Brother of Henry the Navigator Sinclair, and later extended in 1406. Cathedral dismantled in 1560 and all the Catholic idols and relics destroyed. In 1691, John Murray, the Marquis of Atholl, commenced repairs on this eastern limb and restoration, which is today Dunkeld's parish church. Nothing remains of the Bishop's Palace that once stood at the southwest cathedral. Bishops and abbots of Dunkeld held considerable power in Scotland, influencing numerous kings and their courts. Many of them were members of noble families, including Bishop Athelred, third son of Malcolm III.
And this is important to read out as well. Wait, because this is important.
Okay, we'll do the ruins now. This is a different section. Look out for carved stone set in the base of the tower depicting a Pictish warrior on horseback. He's holding a spear and he's blowing a horn, right? Spear in one hand and blowing a horn. Pictish warrior on horseback. Previously in the grounds of nearby Dunkeld House, which we're going to see, yeah,
House Hotel,
which is now a hotel, which we'll see. Built on an earlier Pictish site and now an exclusive country house hotel that you can visit. Now, when we first came, Gary and Caroline wrote this, when we first came here, Ellen and the Belinus node was in the ruins, but very weak, narrow and out of balance. Felt they had suffered due to negative and dramatic interference. We later discovered in 1689 the cathedral witnessed a horrific clash between government troops and Jacobite army, consisting of Highland clans. The Highlanders, fresh from the victory at Killiecrankie, massacred a group of enemy soldiers barricaded in the cathedral, so that's why the energy was blocked.
And we'll be going on to past Killiecrankie from here.
And we'll see this, yeah. You may be able to make out musket shots still visible in the masonry. Having garrisoned themselves in Dunkeld, a 700-strong regiment known as the Cameronians were unaware that the Jacobites had hidden themselves in houses around the town, ready to ambush them. After several skirmishes, the Cameronians sheltered in the church, only to find themselves trapped. The Highlanders forced their way in and massacred a lot of them. A mass grave found with new drains were laid. When new drains were laid, they laid new drains to find a mass grave. It shows the remains with wounds to the skulls. We believe traumatic events such as these leave a dark stain within the magnetic field of the local energy matrix, which in this case forced the feminine serpent, the Ellen current, away from her true path, so it can move a bit. We believe, geology of the area also a factor which contains highly paramagnetic minerals. A highland boundary fault line amplifies the wavelengths of the electromagnetic energy, which holds on to this negative charge in the land created by these horrific acts of desecration. We're nearly finished. After healing the flow of Ellen and Belinus, the currents, we found that these lines or currents had moved to the inner sanctuary of the restored church to form a node at its high altar, which, as mentioned before, is also the exact site of the old Culdee church.
So it's had that healing brought to the area, thanks to them, as I said already. But it would just be so nice if we just done a wee bit of our own.
We want to.
At the southern frontier of the Highlands, near the town of Blair Athol, is Blair Castle. Situated at a strategic position in the valley of the Garry, where it meets the River Tilt. Now one of Scotland's grandest stately homes, this seat of the Earls and Dukes of Athol once controlled the main route through the Highlands from medieval times. Having ventured across a wild and rugged landscape from Grand Tully, Ellen visits the grounds of the castle and a little mound or tumulus with a tree on its summit, close to an ornamental pond in Hercules' garden. Ignoring the grand castle, she instead continues north through the grounds to a ruined church on a raised mound dedicated to St. Bride. The earliest mention of a church on this site is in 1275, when it contributed taxes to help fund the Crusades. According to a legend, the angered spirits of this hallowed site nearly caused the death of Angus Ogg, son of John MacDonald, Lord of Islay, after he attacked and damaged the church in 1475. Having experienced the near loss of his ship, during a freak storm on his trip home to Hili, he immediately returned to St Bride's to compensate for the damage, seeing the storm as some divine retribution. Although much of what you see today dates from the 16th century, its dedication to the Celtic goddess St Bride suggests the site's antiquity. Revered by the early Celts and Picts, this may have been one of her shrines, one of the many bride sanctuaries visited by Ellen in Scotland. We came to believe that the early tribes associated with the Picts were connected with the spirit of the land and knew how to benefit from its healing and rejuvenating energy, in particular the feminine serpent energy. Their druids understood how to maintain the balance and harmony of this terrestrial power through positively working with the energy matrix of Scotland. Despite their warlike reputation, the Picts had a sacred relationship with all elements, including plants, animals and stones. They felt part of nature and not separate from it, regarding everything as an extension of the universe. According to the folklorist Stuart MacHardy, their rituals were a celebration of the unfolding of creation itself and the extraordinary spiritual vitality and sacredness of life. They had the freedom of spiritual expression, honouring and revering nature spirits rather than worshipping divinity. St Bride's Kirk may also have been a sacred burial ground, reused by the Dukes of Atholl. Amongst the tombs are the 6th Duke and his wife, and John Graham Claverhouse, buried here after his death at the Battle of Killiecrankie. The female current was doused through the side chapel housing the Atholl tombs to a cut-marked stone and part of a larger megalith placed in the footings of the north wall. She also visits the more recent private burial site of the Dukes of Atholl and their family before entering woodland, connecting with a giant redwood tree sited on a small mound called Mount Strange. The mound was shaped by the 2nd Duke of Atholl in celebration of taking his seat in Parliament. He had also just inherited the title of Baronry of Strange from his grandmother. Other redwoods were later planted throughout the grounds in 1853, from seeds taken from Yosemite National Park in California. We then encountered the most unusual sight, the statue of the goddess Diana within a grove of these giant trees. The statue, which stands on the flow of Ellen, was originally designed by John Cheer and erected by the 2nd Duke of Atholl in 1737, after planting the grove. It was replaced when damaged after the Great Storm of 1893, and further restored in 1997. Diana is the goddess of the hunt, associated with animals and woodland, often worshipped in oak groves. She is also a moon goddess, representing the preservation of man through childbirth and often seen as active in securing the succession of kings. Perhaps the builders of this exquisite recreation of a pagan shrine had placed the statue here to attract the feminine serpent. During a tour of the interior of the castle, the portraits of the various members of this family allude to an illustrious bloodline, many of them demonstrating huge influence in both England and Scotland over the centuries. Did the situation of their castle help their extraordinary rise to power, being located close to the Omphalos of Scotland, the Spine of Albion, and the ancient Celtic sanctuary of the prehistoric goddess Bride? So it seems there are 2 important cardinal point leys going through Arthur's seat, overlooking the city of Edinburgh. The north-south one comes from St Anthony's Chapel, through the summit, and then through Roslin Chapel and Castle to Mary Magdalene's Chapel on Mount Lothian. This could be a side of a lunation triangle, linking the 3 United Kingdom cities of Edinburgh, Cardiff and London. The other is the east-west equinoctial one, coming through Cairnpapel Hill, Huly Hill and Corstorphine Church. But there will be others, including the one I found at Heriot-Watt University when I was there in 1991 for a multimedia conference. This comes from an unmarked centre on the campus there, and through several apparently subconsciously sited churches in the city to meet the other two on the summit. It goes through Longstone Church, a parish church, part of the Church of Scotland, a Reformed Presbyterian denomination. The present building was built in 1955. There's probably significance in the name, but I can find no details. Then it passes through two churches quite close together. Christ Church Morningside, built in 1876, and Morningside United Church, a more modern building. Approaching Arthur's Seat, it goes through King's Hall Community Church, and then St Margaret and St Leonard Roman Catholic Church, within sight of Salisbury Crags.